Very quickly, I'm going to give you a tour of the various topics we're going to cover in this course, hopefully trying to relate something to you. So it doesn't matter if you're a business major, it doesn't matter if you're a communications major, it doesn't matter if you're anthropology, engineering, economics, whatever. I'm going to relate this course to you personally. That's my goal. And what's nice is there's so many cool, so many good, so many interesting topics that we get to cover in this course, and it makes it fun. So most of you think, oh, this sucks, that I'm going to have to learn about geography and all this, memorize capitals, countries. But in the case of this course, we're going to come across all kinds of relevant but interesting topics, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and all that good stuff. For those of you who are political science majors or international studies, international relations majors, interested in global issues, especially when we think about countries, how they have relationships with each other, trade agreements, political arrangements with each other. So we're going to see some overlap between a lot of those concepts you would learn and the course here, Human Geography. With a great example here looking at the elections. So the 2008 presidential election and 2012 presidential election shown here on the left and right. What I've done is, this is the state of Indiana. We have the individual counties, and we can see, well, 2008 we actually voted Democrat. In 2012 we voted Republican. But if you look at the map, not that much change. But you can see in 2008 there's certain areas, certain counties. And so instead of memorizing and focusing on the where, let's understand the why. And so what happened here? Why did these counties that are in 2008 Democrat, why are they blue and then becoming red here in 2012? And so these are the topics we're going to cover, looking at the election, but relating it to so many different concepts. Relating it to demographics, where are young people located? Relating it to economics, where are unemployed people located? Relating it to migration. How do places change? They change from either people moving into an area or people moving out to an area. All those various things relate to election and geopolitics here at the state and national level. Other things we're going to do, instead of memorizing, okay, well, where are all the countries of Africa located? I'm more interested in, okay, well, yeah, we're going to come across this in our lifetime, new countries coming to be. With one of the examples, South Sudan, one of the newest countries being added to the list of countries of the world. So how does a country become a country? How does all of a sudden South Sudan say, yep, okay, here's our flag over here on the left-hand side, here's our little area, we're now a country. And so we're going to understand, okay, what are the processes of becoming a country? There's specific, we'll say, requirements or rules in order to become a country and say that you're your own country and you can now compete in the Olympics and all that good stuff. Further, international relations. Why do we see places in which there's conflict going on inside those countries? So here's a list of all the countries in which in January 2015 there was some type of conflict, some type of war, some type of situation where hundreds of people dying from violence, from some type of conflict. So we can see much of the countries of the world are engaged in some type of conflict. Why? And so we're not really concerned with, okay, memorizing, well, where's the Ukraine? That's cool, we might know where it is, but why is it that there's some underlying factors, so some simple things that explain why Ukraine is a place where there's conflict, and we can go ahead and predict other places going forward have this certain recipe, have this certain cocktail of different ingredients that are going to be crucial in understanding what conflict occurs there. With a good example being the Iraq. And so the Iraq is a place in which, for the last 30 years, the United States has had some bit of a role in, but we can see that it's a very, very diverse country. It's very complex. So why is it that we can go ahead and we can see certain characteristics in the Iraq which makes it understand as far as why conflict occurs there? All these are things which I'll later explain in the course when we talk about geopolitics, in particular looking at the role of borders, the role of boundaries, the role of different ethnic groups within a country, but also the role of, we'll say, European colonial powers. So a lot of people are psychology majors, and so we think about individual behavior, what causes people to make individual decisions. So we can think about, psychology. Some of the issues that real-world issues that geographers are studying is the role of what we call Geo Slavery. The idea that everything's being monitored. Everything has a GPS attached to it. So essentially, people always can monitor where other people are located, which is kind of creepy. And so there's some ethics to all of this. And so do people behave differently when they're being watched, when they're being monitored? And so we look at businesses. A lot of businesses have fleet of vans or a fleet of trucks which they're company cars, company vehicles. Well, what if all of a sudden people are being monitored by their boss as far as where they're locating, where they're going? Are they going to lunch too soon? Are they spending too much time in a certain space? So psychology is one instance of it. Another thing is looking at where are tourists frightened? Where are tourists comfortable? And so we look at downtown Indianapolis. I mean, there's a lot of tourists come here. Well, we could, go interview them and say, tourists, where do you find, Indianapolis to be scary? Where do you find it kind of be confusing or not safe? We know if we're from here, we might know the reasons why, but for someone who moves here, a tourist, they don't know. And so what they're doing is they're attaching GPSs with heart rate monitors to tourists, with the idea that when tourists get to an area that might be have fear, their heart rate would go up. And so all this can be mapped. And so looking at the individual behavior, in this case, the fear of an area from someone who's not from there. That's much better than interviewing them and saying, hey, where do you find your fear? Where do you find areas that you're scared? Other ways of looking at psychology is something we won't look at too much in this course, but in other geography courses they do, and it's something called mental maps. So the idea is our perceptions of a place are based on where we go, our experiences, where we work, where we shop. So we can see here, these are two different maps in which I asked two different people. I said, map the area from, this is down in Greenwood, from Stones Crossing Road all the way up to County Line. One person routed off all these various places, weren't really concerned too much about the roads, but they're at the top. You can see they knew everywhere. They took a lot of time. They are very familiar with all the various restaurants, all the various fast food, gas stations, and so on. Where the person at the bottom, they're more road specific, especially roads that matter to them. They left out a lot of roads, but they also are focusing just on the places that they know. And so you can see on the bottom one, they have this restaurant on the bottom right called Arnie's. So it's probably a place they frequent, maybe a place they work at. Where the person at the top, they don't even list Arnie's. They just know it's this building, a restaurant that happens to be somewhere on this route. It's a mental maps. And so you have your own perception of an area, whether your hometown, Indianapolis. You might have areas you find safe, areas you don't find safe, areas of campus that you might know more about. So, for example, a med student is going to know all about the buildings around the Riley and Simon and Eskenazi and all of that. Where the engineering student, they're going to know where the science and tech buildings are and the subsequent parking lots that connect to those buildings. And so all this is the idea that our world, our view of our of space, of this world that we're walking around in, is totally tied to our perceptions of it, and that's all of it's based on our experiences of places we go to, places we frequent, and all that jazz. A very big challenge of mine is to make demography something that you typically think is happens in the basements of libraries in which old men peer through old dusty books. We're going to make it sexy, we're going to make it hip, we're going to make it interesting, but also relate it to you personally. And like I said I was going to make it sexy, but in this case, this is sex ratios. This isn't how much people get it on. Instead, this is just comparing males versus females. And so what this map shows is at the county level, so individual counties are being mapped here. Places that are blue are places in which there's more males than females. Places that are red are places where there's more females than males. So we got all kinds of patterns going on here. First off, a lot more females in the eastern part, or on the right-hand side of the United States, whereas in the western side, a lot more males. A lot of that's tied to migration. Historically, and still to this day, migrants typically are men. And so throughout the West, throughout its history, it's had a continued migration of inward people moving into the area from somewhere else. So you also have in the East a lot of universities. And so today in the United States, a majority of the college students are females. And so it makes sense where we have more universities littered throughout much of the eastern United States, we find more females. And so we're going to do a lot more of demography, but that's just a quick snapshot. Now let's look at kind of how human geography, how we're going to overlap with cultural studies, anthropology, and sociology, looking at groups of different cultures, of different ethnic groups, and what have you. One way to look at culture is look at language, and so what do we call things? This is a very interesting map. It's seen a few of these that have been made in the last 10, 15 years. And what it is a cool way to showcase computer mapping and the new mapping of today. What this is essentially users go to this site, they punch in their zip code where they're from, and then they punch in, okay, what do they call? Pop, soda, Coke, what do you call it? And you can see a clear pattern. Overwhelmingly, those in the American South call it Coke, whereas overwhelmingly in the North, you find people saying pop. Whereas you see in the coast, you see more of soda, and you see different places in which it's a very, very big mix. For example, Oklahoma. But one of the things is, okay, well, why is Coke so popular in the South? Why is this, we see this certain cultural pattern of people calling a soda a Coke, even if it's Dr. Pepper, even if it's Mountain Dew, whatever, and that's because Coke is from the South. Its headquarters is in Atlanta, Georgia. It's very much a cultural product of the South. So, for example, Chick-fil-A, another Southern company. Well, Chick-fil-A, they would never sell Pepsi. They're very much a Southern company, just like Coke. So they always sell Coke products there. So Coke very popular in terms of what it's called there in the South. But if you look at Central Indiana, you see a lot of people that call it Coke, and it's kind of an isolated island there. You see it's surrounded, much of the other areas of Indiana. You see yellow. And a lot of that's because Central Indiana, especially Indianapolis, has a lot of people who've migrated over time from the South, migrated over time from Kentucky, Tennessee. So a lot of the IUPUI students have relatives and descendants from those particular areas. So a lot of this has to do with migration. Further, some have said that Indianapolis is the most northern southern city. And in many respects, you could say, yeah, that's true based on this, in which it's the most northern purple area we see here on the Coke soda pop map. Also, we look at religion. So here we see 3 different places in which religion is clearly evident as far as it matters here. So we see Paris, France there at the top, the Notre Dame Cathedral. We see at the bottom left, we see Rio de Janeiro with obviously a religious figure there. That's in terms of that statue. In the bottom right, this is St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. And if you look at the shape, you can kind of see what we're looking at is we're looking at a key. If you look at this from the aerial view a little bit higher, you can see that. So this circular area is the base of the key, and then the teeth of the key, or the long skinny part of the key, you're looking straight at down the street. And so what that is a symbol that this is the key to heaven, St. Peter's Gate, and all that stuff that relates to Catholicism. So in the case of religion, we can see how it plays a clear role, and it's very much showcased in these particular places that, hey, this matters here. So we'll look at why it matters, and we'll look at different trends in different religions. Here we see the finest restaurant in all of the United States, McDonald's, and how it's globalized across the world. So what does this mean for culture? When, here we have an Asian country, I believe this is going to be somewhere in South Asia. So here we have a place that's very, very far from the United States, but you're going to see a McDonald's there. You'll see Walmart there. You see as far as the dress. People dress very similar to here. And so one of the things you're noticing is culturally, much of the world is becoming more similar. We're becoming more the same. We're eating the same stuff. We're watching the same stuff. We're playing the same games. We have smartphones. We're doing the same things. We're getting on the internet. We're all downloading porn. We're all getting on Facebook. And so essentially what I'm getting to is this idea that cultures have changed. And is that positive or is that a negative? So these are things that we'll look at. Here's a Chinese buffet here in the United States. For the most part, this is nothing that you would see in China. And so one of the things, if you go to a Chinese buffet, it's definitely been adapted locally. So it's Chinese food that's been essentially Americanized. And so one of the things, we'll look at different products, different things, different cultures, different outcomes of different cultures coming together as we get new things. In this case, highly fried, high fat content Chinese food, which is already high in sodium. Now we kick it up with a bunch of cholesterol, a bunch of fattening foods, a bunch of deep fried and all that stuff that we love here in the United States of America. So as globalization causes all this situations of everything looking the same, McDonald's and Walmart's everywhere, Chinese buffets, which are fusions of Chinese and American food, we have these more isolated areas in terms of this group here in Africa that's been able to resist change. How? Why? Why is that the case? Where do we find these particular groups? But how are they able to resist? I don't see anyone staring at their smartphone. I don't see anyone texting. I don't see anyone with Beats on. bobbing their heads like you'd find all throughout the world, and much of the influences of popular culture. Here, they've been able to resist that. Why? So these are some things that we're going to look at throughout this semester. Also look at the overlap of health and medicine with human geography. And so those of you who are pre-med, biology majors, nursing majors, then you're going to find some topics that will be of interest and be of relevance to you. One of the things is our IUPUI Geography Department specializes in health and medical geography. It makes sense. We've got all these medical facilities located on our campus or near our campus. It makes sense to have different relationships. And so it sounds corny, but through our research, we're saving lives. We're coming up with solutions to health-related problems, particularly those here in Indiana. In the United States, the key killer as far as how people die, especially in particular areas of the South and the Midwest, is heart disease, so essentially heart attacks. So why? Why are these particular areas more susceptible? So what's going on is we've got a lot of behavioral factors, a lot of cultural factors. Think about the South, they fry everything. Okra, mushrooms, cucumbers, zucchinis, tomatoes, they fry everything. And so that plays a key role in why they have higher cholesterol, higher heart disease rates, what have you. Also more of a sedentary population, a little bit more, less likely to move, less likely to do exercise. Also tie that into education levels as well. So you got these various fundamental factors that we all know help to explain why people have heart disease, but we can see the results of the map here. So what does that mean? Well, we can come up with better solutions. So having cardiovascular or heart disease clinics, more heart disease attention in these particular areas would make a whole lot more sense than just sending every single state getting their equal share of funding for heart disease. So this is kind of coming up with solutions to problems. So when we think about the United States, this is how we die. We also die, like many other countries, we're more likely to die of cirrhosis of the liver because we drink too much booze. I don't know about too much, but we drink a lot of booze. So you can see here places that are maroon or black are areas in which they have higher rates of alcohol consumption. Why there? Why is it that people drink more? Why is it in the beige areas, in the cream-colored areas, particularly there in northern Africa and the Middle East, why they have lower rates of alcohol consumption? A lot of this is tied to cultural factors, particularly the role of the Muslim faith there in those Muslim countries of the Middle East and North Africa. So here we can see the role and how that can maybe play a key role in understanding liver failure in certain areas of the world. But the big topic of 2014 was Ebola. So Ebola is a common way in which people obviously died in just a small little area of Africa throughout 2013, 2015. So what this was is an infectious disease, and so you're more likely to find in poor countries, lower income countries, less developed areas of the world, infectious diseases or things like malaria, things like Ebola, things that are passed from one person to the next to kill people. Whereas in the United States, as I've already shown, more likely to die of liver cancer, liver failure, liver cirrhosis of the liver, heart disease, and all of that. So understanding, okay, how does this disease spread? Where did it originate? How did it spread to certain areas? And then we definitely saw the role of airplanes in these global networks as far as taking something that's essentially a local problem here just in the small little area of Western Africa now becomes a global issue as people then take that disease all throughout the world. Now we'll look at economics and business. And so those of you who are Kelley School of Business students, maybe SPIA students, are those just interested in business, we're definitely going to be able to relate to things that you're going to be interested in or that you study yourself. When we look at the global economy, things are changing. So one of the things that's happening is people have a little bit more extra cash throughout the world. So when you have a little bit more extra cash, you're going to buy more things that you previously couldn't buy, like cars. And so what's happening at the same time is cars are becoming more affordable. So here we have something that in this case is seen as quite the positive. The Tata Motor Company has built the Nano, which it's a $2,000 brand new car. So people have greater access to private transportation, so that gives them more freedom. So all the various reasons why we love our cars in Indiana, in the United States, is we can go wherever we want, whenever we want. We don't have to wait for a train. We don't have to wait for a bus more often than not. We don't have to walk. We don't have to ride a horse. This is great. So more people have access to cars. So this creates greater freedom, but at the same time, this is going to be seen as a negative in terms of environmentally. More CO2 emissions, more carbon, more air pollution essentially being created as a result of more cars being added to the road. And so we see the positive negatives and see how the global economy, how it relates to culture, how it relates to economics, how it relates to mobility, but also how it relates to the environment. We'll also look at the role of agriculture, how it's changed historically, and how, northern Indiana, actually much of Indiana, you would see this scene, this huge, massive field of nothing but one crop. Why is that? Why is that how things have changed? Why is that the business or the economics of agriculture today in Indiana and in the United States? Another thing we'll look at is different cities and regions, how they specialize in certain things, and how that plays a key role in their local economy. For example, in Indianapolis, we specialize in government, finance, banking, sports, hotels, conventions. In Nashville, Tennessee, they specialize in music. Las Vegas, they specialize in sin. Los Angeles, entertainment. In the case of San Francisco, Oakland, and what we call Silicon Valley, this area of along the coastal of the kind of the northern coast of California is an area of high-tech companies. High-tech companies that we see all throughout the internet. So Google, Yahoo, LinkedIn, Intel, Facebook, Adobe, Cisco, Apple, Yahoo, if I already said it, cool. All these are different companies that have all clustered and all located in the same region of the same little area of California. Why? Why? Because they're taking advantage of the fact that you have a lot of high-tech people. You have a lot of people that are skilled, a lot of smart people in creating new businesses. You have lots of computer programmers who are good on the technical side. You have lots of people with lots of money who are going to fund various projects. And so this all makes sense why all these high-tech companies have all located in the same area to take advantage of the expertise of that region. Subsequently, what does that mean for this area? Especially because all these companies are doing super well right now. It's doing great things for the economy here. And so you look at the areas of the country. This area, San Francisco, Sacramento, San Jose, Oakland, this area here, Berkeley, high-tech company that's going to be, we're going to continue to see economic growth in this particular area as they continue to create new ideas, new products, new things that are widely used throughout much of the world. History and geography have lots of overlap, and so we'll look at how maybe some of you history majors can find some relevant information from this course. And how I'm going to use history in terms of this course is look at how cities have changed over time. How, for example, Indianapolis has changed. And so its downtown has pretty much maintained, it's been the same. The downtown area around the circle has been tall buildings, has been government, has been hotels, has been restaurants, has been shopping, and it's been that way for a long, long time. However, if you go over to the Star area where IUPUI Campus Center is today, you can see this predates IUPUI, but predates a large campus, predates a large amount of those hospitals in this area, and so it used to be historically all residential. And so how has a place changed from being nothing but residences to now nothing but commercial buildings, a university, a hospital, and what have you? A lot of this has to do with changes that have happened over time. What's happened over time is we saw people continue to move out of this downtown area. And so also what's happened is the government, local government, has cleared out and removed a lot of those residents. And so what previously in the 1941 map around that Star area, we saw a bunch of houses. It's very hard to see, but all of it was just this very densely packed neighborhood. Now you can see how these big parking lots and big buildings, how you have the track stadium that's being added, the parking garages, the hospitals. So here you have an area that's been cleared of people that actually live there, and now it's more offices, workplaces, hospitals, and all of that. And so these are things that we've seen throughout time in Indianapolis, changes. Whereas the downtown circle area, once again, pretty much maintains, it's still the same. Now, like anything, as technology continues to evolve, our aerial photography from, this is all from MapIndy, free site, produced by the Indian government, and also provides some jobs for some geography majors. But we can see how the technology's changed. We can clearly see now with color the various areas of Indianapolis. But now you can really see all those gray areas, all those kind of light gray areas. Some of them are rooftops, but overwhelmingly most of them are parking lots. And this makes sense. Back in 1941, not everyone had an automobile. And so you didn't have a lot of parking garages. A lot of people lived close to the downtown area. Now more and more people have moved out to suburban areas. And so while they still might work downtown, they live much farther away from the downtown area. So subsequently, they need places to park their cars. Also, you can now clearly see how IUPUI has been changed. And we see, apart from a few dorms, apart from this guy I know who lives in his van in a parking garage, apart from those people, there's pretty much no one that lives on campus anymore. So here this area has been cleared of its residential area, now heavily commercial, which we can clearly see in these historical aerial photographs. And of course, being an urban school, and as I just showcased, we looked at some historical aerial photographs of cities and how they change. We're definitely going to look at urban issues. It makes sense. We're going to definitely see more and more people moving to urban areas. I would argue cities are going to become increasingly more relevant, increasingly more jobs located there. And so we're going to definitely focus on cities at all kinds of scales, at the global level, the local level, national level, and what have you. Further proof that more and more people moving to urban areas, we're seeing cities just continue to grow and grow and grow. Back in 1975, Tokyo was the largest city in the world. It had 26 million people. And so at that time, the next largest city, there's a couple that were 10 million people. So the second and third largest cities in the world at the time was right around 10 million people. By 2025, so just in a few years, we'll actually have 27 cities that were the size that Tokyo once was, which was the dominant city. In 50 years, essentially now we've got 27 cities that were the same size as Tokyo once was this dominant city. Now we've got more and more like them. So more and more people moving to urban areas. Why? How? How is that happening? Where is that happening? Is it happening in the United States? Is it happening in Africa? Happening in Asia? All those are things that we'll look at throughout this course. Further, how cool is this? In 2007, so I hope you were alive during 2007, that was the first time in the history of human civilization, the history of humans on this earth, that more people lived in settlements or cities, villages, than in rural areas. So that passed over there in 2007, and you can see how that percentage is only increasing. In fact, some have found out that about 180,000 people per day are moving from rural areas to urban areas. So of course we're going to look at different places, and so here we see what they call an urban slum. This is in Mumbai, India. So there's a movie called Slumdog Millionaire, which kind of made this particular slum a little bit more well known. And so here we see this particular living conditions, but once again, something I'll mention throughout this course is, this is culturally, this is what people know. So this might look like dire living conditions, but people who go to universities in the United States, who move from India to the United States for school, might grow up in these villages. So it's more than meets the eye. But one of the things, we see all kinds of things happening here. We see this train on the right-hand side. So we try to understand, how do people get from rural areas to urban areas? How do people get to especially these urban slum areas? Well, right there, you can clearly see it with the role of that transportation line, the role of that train that brings people conveniently in from rural areas to urban areas. And this is another place, Kibera, Africa, where we see another urban slum. But once again, things aren't as dire as people would think. And so you look at this dilapidated housing, some of the worst living conditions possible, but people, you look at how well dressed they are. So once again, there's an economy here. There's a functioning economy. So when we look at cities, there's more than meets the eye. Especially when we look at these places, we think of it just as people just kind of walking around, looking for free aid, waiting for government and foreign aid to come. And it's not like that at all. These are cities that function just like any other city, function just like Indianapolis, but of course, just look a whole lot different. Here's a cool map we're going to see time and time again. It's called the Census Dot Map. And so what this guy did was he took census data from 2010. He put a dot where every single person in the United States who's a citizen lives. And so if you took the census, if you're registered, you're somewhere on there. If you zoom in close enough, you'll find yourself. But here, and so what this shows is you don't see any state lines. No state lines shown here. But you can kind of see the location of these different urban areas. So, for example, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Chicago. But we're actually going to make sense of this map. It looks like it's kind of chaotic, but there's really no sense, there's no pattern. As far as the small dots, the small little black areas, the small towns, they're actually kind of almost evenly spaced. You really see that when you look over there in Illinois, how they're almost evenly spaced from each other. We're going to explain why that's the case later on this semester when we talk about central place theory. Finally, as I mentioned, this course I'm trying to make it as relevant to you as possible, and since about 90% of the students at IUPUI who attend, who are enrolled in courses, whether it be online or on campus, 90% live in one of these 9 counties here. So they might not be from there, but if you go to school here, you're going to eventually probably move to one of these areas. And so why? Where? So we see definitely these suburban areas, these places outside of Marion County. Why are they, kind of almost along interstates, these red lines? Why are they along key networks? So when did that pattern start to evolve? So suburbanization. So we're going to once again relate concepts to you. In this case, suburbanization and why it's very common for a lot of people to live in one of those various cities or counties outside of the core Indianapolis downtown area.